but I assume you're there. Let's see.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. I heard you. Okay, everybody. So I don't know if anybody saw any of my emails. I'm very nervous for this class. Usually I'm excited. I'm also excited, but this class, I find myself to be a little nervous. So why am I nervous? Whenever I learn, or especially when I teach about any of our leaders, any of the Torah giants and their mistakes, I enter it with a certain amount of trepidation, because we have to be very careful when we judge and we highlight the mistakes of the greatest people of our generation. Not of our generation, I'm sorry, wrong word. Of history, of our history. And it kind of it's almost a pet peeve of mine when I see other situations where people learn the Torah, the parshas, the portions, and they speak in a certain way about the great people that are found in the Torah. Oh, David, you're in on your computer. Here we go. We see two Davids in a moment. So what do I mean by that? You have, in situations, famous mistakes that are found. There are famous mistakes that people speak about a lot. You have, I don't know, mistakes are even the right word to use. You have obviously like the case of Moses hitting the rock. Moses hits the rock, makes a tremendous mistake. God tells him to speak to the rock. He hits the rock. He doesn't go to Israel. He hits the rock. So one can learn and read that almost literally. God said, Moses, I want you to speak to the rock. Moses says, no, God, I'm not going to speak to the rock. I'm going to hit the rock. And I hit the rock. And God says to Moses, Moses, I told you to speak. You didn't listen. Don't go to Israel. Where really, if we do the proper context, we have to put everything into the context. Who was Moses? What was his relationship with God? What was his expectation? What was really his mistake? Which is really a very important place where we find the commentaries and the oral law come in to really give us the proper context in these situations. Another common story that I see here a lot and is about Joseph and his brothers. The brothers are sometimes depicted as jealous, rude, not very righteous individuals who have this horrible anger and jealousy towards their brother, and they decide they're just going to kill him and get rid of him. And there's a certain unnuanced approach to sometimes, not everybody and not always, but I've seen it, and I think we can all be prone to doing that without really understanding who were the brothers. These are the future tribes, or they were the tribes of Israel. They're tremendously righteous people. What was their thought process? We have to dig deep behind the surface. It's like, and I mentioned this before, and it's almost something that clearly I feel very strongly about it, because I think I bring it up more than once. When it comes to how God judges and how he views the righteous and the very righteous. And I give the comparison. I don't know how many people have seen First Take. Anybody watch First Take? Anybody familiar, right, with First Take on sports? Stephen A. Smith. You have different sports. Everybody sports radio. You listen to people judging sports players, and they have a back and forth choker. He's a bust. And you have people who have talents that you can't even begin to imagine. Like the backup bench warmer on any NBA team could hit who knows how many shots in a row with his eyes closed. The talent is unbelievable. And hence they get judged because we have an expectation how great they are. But I guess the question is, but why, if the mistakes that we find in the Torah are really on an almost infinitesimal level, that things that the Torah spells out where people erred and they make a mistake, they almost always cannot be taken on face value. There's more going on. It's within the context. Why does the Torah have to share with us the mistakes of the greats when they are so small. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I know Howard. Oh, I knew Howard would want to come. So let me just, I'm sorry. Hang on one second. My apologies. And everybody's still thinking. Let me copy invite link here. We're going to send it over to him. I was going to do it. I never know. It's like if somebody doesn't show, it's okay. But I feel weird pressuring somebody. Like, here's the link in case you want to come. It's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't make it, Rabbi. That's why I don't want to send a link to somebody when just because things happen. Life's busy. So we're going to discuss today the episode between, and we're going to talk about it inside, between Sarah and Abraham, and Sarah's maidservant. His name was Hagar. And the Torah very much does not shy away when our matriarchs, our patriarchs make a mistake. And it's important for us to realize when we learn it, to put it into context. And the Torah tells us because we have to learn from their mistakes. Even though if you and I were in their position, we would have made the mistake times a billion. And there's often, we understand that if we were there, we probably wouldn't even be able to perceive that there was any wrongdoing. It's only because that God and the Torah are able to really see the inner workings of a person's heart and intentions. The Torah almost testifies, able to see what is going on, and they share with us, because the whole Torah is for us, as a book of life, a book of how we should live our life. And we see that through how Hashem interacts and how our greatest people of our history interacted. Okay. So with that little brief intro, perfect timing, Howard joins us. Okay. Welcome, Howard. Okay. So we're going to begin here with this story. I'm not sure how many are familiar with it. I'm going to act as if nobody knows about it. And if somebody knows about it, it'll be somewhat of a review. How's that sound? Great. Okay. I shared the wrong screen. Hang on one second. Oh, no. Everybody see this screen here?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah,
okay. So let's just, you got it, Brian?
Yes, I've got it. Thank you, Rabbi.
You got it. Awesome. Okay. So just a little background. So Avram and Sarah, at the still time right here, you'll see that Sarah is not yet Sarah. Avraham is not yet Avraham. It is Avram and Sarai. They still have not gotten a name change. And they've been married for quite some time. I want to say, I don't know how long they've been married for, but I want to say Avram right now is close to 90 years old, I want to say. And Sarai, I believe, is close to 80, but I did not confirm that. But they're older. They're older, and they don't have any children, which is obviously something that is very worrisome to them. And it's something that they really want to have. I'm just looking quickly back at the verse, see if it said anywhere how old they were, and I don't see that here. So I'm sorry. Okay, it doesn't say there. 99. So he was. I would say he was around 90, just to be safe. Around 90 years old. So Sarai, who was aware that she is not having any children, she doesn't seem to be having any children. She realizes the only way she can ever have a child is through some absolutely never seen before miracle. So in a way, she has this idea. She has a maidservant named Hagar. The maidservant Hagar was an Egyptian lady, and the commentaries in the Talmud share with us that she was the daughter of Paro, when Avram and Sarai went through Egypt during the famine, and unfortunately Sarai was kidnapped and by Paro. So the amount of punishments that Paro received, Paro was awed by just the miracles that God did to Sarai and Avram. So he's decided to give his daughter to them. And the line the Talmud says, it's better that my daughter be a maidservant in the house of Avram and Sarai than her to be a princess in my house. Because clearly these are very special people. And that's how Hagar ended up being with Sarai. So Sarai has an idea. These are the verses right out of the Torah. This is the written Torah right out of the Chumash, right out of any portion. So we'll read it as it says. And clearly it's a very intense back and forth over here. And I'm not even sure where we're going to end up with this today, but I think all this here, there's probably a lot of fascinating things we can glean from the very first two people to follow in the ways of Hashem. So we have Sarai, Abram's wife, bore no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai has this idea, says to Avram, look, the Lord has kept me from bearing. Consort with my maid. Perhaps I shall have a son through her. Right? Marry my maidservant. I'm not having any children. Why don't you marry my maidservant and have a child through her? Perhaps I shall have a son through her. Vatikak, so it is there. So Sarai, Abram's wife, by the way, took her maid, Hagar the Egyptian, after they were in the land for 10 years, and Sarai gave her to her husband, Abram, as concubine. Really a little bit repetitive here. Next verse. He cohabited with Hagar and she conceived. So they got together and right away, Hagar conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. All of a sudden, after Hagar has children or is expecting, she doesn't look the same way as Sarai. So Sarai says to Abram, the wrong done me. I should have looked over before. I don't know. They translate these things. I don't know the English. The wrong done me is your fault. She blames Avram. It's all your fault. I myself put my maid in your bosom. Now that she sees that she is pregnant, I am lowered in her esteem. Look at her. She doesn't look at me the same way. She yells at Avram, the Lord decided between you and me. Go ahead. So Avram said to Sarai, your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think is right. Then Sarai treated her harshly and she ran away from her. This is the episode here. Now, right off the bat, this is a lot of, Sarai doesn't look very good. I think we can all admit that from the psukim. It's very confusing. What is she doing? She doesn't have any children. Here, Avram, marry my maidservant. Maybe she'll have children. So she said, okay. He marries her maidservant. What is Avram doing? What's the back and forth there? Okay, fine. She took her. The verses are so bizarre. She took his wife. I know who Sarai. I know she is her wife. What's happening here? And then she gets all upset. What did you expect was going to happen? What's going on here? And then she treated her harshly. She ran away. What does that mean? She treated her harshly. What's going on? She ran away. She kicked her out. Very hard on the face value to really understand and appreciate what exactly is going on here. So it's important to, again, Howard, you missed a little bit of the intro, which is fine. We had to put this in the context. We have to realize who we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the greatest of the greats that ever existed. Abram and Sarai are responsible at the time for really spreading monotheism throughout the entire world. They were the leaders. They were it. They were tremendously holy people that had a very unique, special connection with God, and God had a very special connection with them. So, and these are people who are emulating God in every way possible. Their giving, their kindness, their patience, their humility. So what in the world is happening on here? So enter in the Nachmanides. I'm sorry for all the scripture today. Usually I don't do all this words and stuff, but for this particular situation, it's almost, when you see it in real time, for this particular class, I think it helps bring everything to light. You don't have to read it inside with me. You want to follow along, it'll be good. So what's going on here? The verse said, and Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. Why does the Torah have to tell us that he did that? Just tell us what he did. So it's so amazing to watch the interpersonal relationship between the husband, Avram, and Sarai. Now, it's important to realize at the time, now after the Torah was given, we're not allowed to really marry more than one wife. We're not allowed to. No, we're really allowed. We are not allowed to. That is forbidden. Do not do that. If you see any holy rabbi with two wives, it's not forbidden. He is not doing the Torah. But before the Torah was given, it was permissible. So Avram, the entire time that he's married with Sarah, he has no children. He can marry another wife whenever he wants. Avram, you want to have children? Sarai, you're not having children with Sarah? Go get married. He could have done it at any time. So the verse says, Avram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. Why did he do so? He didn't say and he did so. Because even though Avram was very desirous of having a child, says the Nachmanides and the Ramban, he did not do so without Sarai's permission. I'm not going to get married to another person. I can die without children. You should stop for a moment to just appreciate that for a moment. You know, we're all husbands here. I'll share the screen in a second. But if you think about that, just to pause that for a moment, Avram, God's telling Avram that your descendants are going to be like the stars of the earth, the stars of the sky, the sand on the earth, and you have this future. The future descendants are going to go through you. This land of Israel is going to go through you and through your children. And he has no children. And if he dies without children, it's Dunsky. There's nothing. He dies without children, there's nothing. So I have a good idea. Why don't you go marry another wife and have children? I'm not doing this without Sarah's permission. Not doing it. What are you waiting for? Well, ask her. No, he's not going to budge. He's not going to do it. He's going to wait for Sarah to give him the go-ahead, and that's when he's going to do it. So here she goes. Okay, Sarah, you want me to marry somebody? I'll do so, and I'm going to listen to your voice. This is what you said. And even now, it was not his intention to build up a family from Hagar. Even when Abram married Hagar, it was never his intention that his future was going to go to Hagar, that his children would be from him. God has promised me this land to my descendants. The descendants are going to come through Sarah. So why am I marrying Hagar? His intent was merely to do Sarai's will. What did Sarah want? So that she may build a family from Hagar, for she will find satisfaction in her handmaids, I never heard that word, children, or that by the merit of this act, she'll become worthy to have children, as rabbis have said. So right there, Nachmanides is giving us a little bit of a background. What was Sarai thinking? What does this do for you? There's two things. There's no children. Marry my maidservant, and there's a tremendous sacrifice on my behalf. Even before we know what's going to happen, she realizes what it means to bring another wife into the home. And it's for Avram, for us. We want to try to have children here, descendants here. Maybe Abraham's intention wasn't to build through Hagar, but Sarai's intention was, listen, God is promising our family something. It's not coming through me. Bring somebody here. Let's see what happens. So Avram's like, listen, you want this? I don't want this. But you want this? I'm going to do it for you. So right away, through the sages, to the Talmud, to the Ramban, we now see that there's a little more light shed on Avram's position and Sarai's position. And we go further here. So Sarai took. It says right at the top, it said, after they did this, what happens? So Sarai took her maid. So it sounds like the verse says that after they decide, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Okay, so let's do this. So all of a sudden, Sarah has to go. She's going to bring Hagar to Avram. And the Nachmanides is asking the question, why is Sarai Avram? Okay, Sarai gave you the go-ahead. Go get Hagar, go get married. So it tells us that Avram did not hurry the matter. I'm not doing anything. Yeah, we agreed to this, right? I think, sometimes as us husbands, we've been there. The wife, we've come to a decision that we're going to do something, but I'm not going to, it's your call. Even though I know it's uncomfortable for you, I'm still going to wait for you to make that first step. So she goes and does it, and she gives it. A second. And furthermore, just again, to appreciate what Sarah is doing, that it says that Sarah, Abraham's wife, to Abraham, her husband, to allude that Sarah did not despair of Abraham. It's not that Sarah is like, I'm out of here. Here's Hagar, I'm out. He didn't despair from Abraham, and that she did not render herself distant from him, as she was his wife and he her husband. But she wanted that Hagar also be his wife. This is why the verse states, and she gave her to Abraham, her husband, meaning you're still my husband, to be his wife. I'm not leaving, and I'm not asking her to be a concubine one level down. She's going to be a full-fledged wife, meaning that she was I read it as fast. She did not be as a concubine, but as a woman married to him. And this reflects the ethical conduct of Sarah and her respect towards her husband, meaning full-fledged. It's going to be a real full thing here. You're going to be married to Hagar. And through this, somehow, through my sacrifice, through our sacrifice, this should be a merit for us moving forward. And that was the thought process behind Sarah and Abram. I think that's all. Nothing there, I think, is unique. But I think what has to happen is what happens next? What goes wrong? What goes wrong? And what is their reaction? How do we understand their reaction? And how does that apply to us? I think is more the next steps here. Okay, so let's see. It gets pretty dangerous here. Okay, Howard, I said I'm always nervous by this because Sarah, it's like you mess, with the greatest of the great. You almost have to ask like for my forgiveness before I even do this, because we're trying on our best to understand this and appreciate this, to grow from this. But we're not here bashing them. This is not a bashing session of our mothers and our fathers. Okay, so it says that her mistress was slighted in her eyes. What happens? So the verse tells us we have to remember that it's very fascinating. So they get married. And the verse says cohabited with Hagar, and she conceived. Immediately. Right away. First get together, they conceive. So what happens? Her mistress was slighted in her eyes. She said, Hagar used to say, as regards this woman Sarai, her conduct in private can certainly not be like that in public. She pretends to be a righteous woman, but she cannot really be righteous. Since all these years, she has not been privileged to have children, while I had the blessing from the first union. And this is what Hagar used to say. Hagar used to go around. Oh, you think Sarai is this big special lady? Oh, she's so holy. Oh, you listen to her. You follow her ways. You think she's the speaker of God. You think she's so righteous? Look, years with Avram, nothing. Me, one night. That's it. How could she be more holier than me? This is what she was telling the people who was coming to the house. The tents that people would enter in. People used to always go see Sarai. Oh, Sarai, Sarai, Sarai. Hagar's like, don't go to her, come to me. And clearly Sarai did not appreciate that. Then why take a moment and pause? How she reacted is going to be kind of in about 30 seconds. Why do you think that would bother Sarai? This is kind of open. I don't really see anybody saying this. This is something for us to try to understand. Why would Sarai need to react to this? Let it go. Be quiet. Any thoughts? Chuck, I see you're unmuted, Chuck.
Because she felt that she was lowered in Avram's eyes. Because the Egyptian, who in the text did not say she was getting married, says he was going to be a concubine.
In the text, it says, one thing, I changed screens without sharing it, but I just like switched gears, right?
And gave it to her husband Abraham as concubine.
So it's interesting here. They do translate it as concubine. That's the English here. But I would just say in the Hebrew, I think that's a poor translation. He said, if you gave Atitain Osal Avram, she gave her to Avram, Isha, her husband, lo, to him, Isha, as a wife. It says Isha as a wife. Now, happens to be, Chuck, just because Sarai's intention was to give Hagar to Avram as a wife doesn't necessarily mean that's what Avram did, if that's the point you're making. Doesn't mean Avram exactly did that. But that was clearly the intention, to be a wife to Avram. But yet, even if that is true, that I think that is a fair point. Clearly, she could be very sensitive to how Avram views her. Now, I would say that would be tremendous. You know what a chiddush is, Chuck? That would be a tremendous insight that would be very hard for me to understand. You're telling me, Chuck, after, and I'm not saying you could be wrong, but I just want to appreciate what you're saying in the context. After decades, over 80 years of living together with Avram, side by side, partners, going through everything that they went through, close as that can be, through all the struggles and all the challenges and all the spreading of Judaism they've been doing, the relationship couldn't have been any more closer and perfect than we ever could imagine. Yet with all of that, all that trust, right? We celebrate 50 year anniversary, 60-year anniversary. Talk about a 70, 80-year anniversary. But because this wife, who I gave to you, Avram, has conceived, and she's saying stuff, I now feel threatened in this house. Now, it could be, Chuck. I'm not saying you're wrong. To me, that would be very amazing, incredible, of really the sensitivity of a human being, and particularly a wife, which it could be. You know, I can imagine this is sorrow, this is a relationship. So for us, that'll be a tremendous lesson for us in our relationship with our wives. You know, how sensitive.
It seemed like a good idea at the time, but when it happened, she had second thoughts.
She had second thoughts. And clearly it was predicated on Hagar's reaction. Seemingly, if Hagar were to be, I guess, appreciative and not, mean, whatever she was, ungrateful and not damaging, could be things would have continued honky-dory. But Hagar had this reaction. But that could be, Chuck. Anybody else want to offer another idea, a thought of why Sarah needed to react?
Rabbi, I was going to ask something. In the text, is it clear? I mean, the description of Hagar's reaction, that's Sarai's description, right?
Right. So the verse.
We don't actually have any statements directly from Hagar, any
all
behavior that we've observed exhibited by her. It's just Sarai saying,
right,
I'm lowered in her esteem. So is that reliable that we know that? I mean, I guess we've got the commentary that does say that Hagar was basically talking badly, but I didn't actually see that in the
Fair enough. Yes, the text itself, all the text says is that Sarai says that now, to understand, now she is pregnant, I am lower in her esteem. That's what she said. She is pregnant, and I am lower in her esteem. And the question is begging, what does that mean? Who cares? How did that happen? Because she's pregnant, I am lower in her esteem. Why? What was going on? Now, I agree. If we just had the verses, it'd be one massive unknown. Yeah, I don't know. Because she said so. Why? I don't know why. Who knows? Nobody knows. But that's why, thank God, it's very, it's really a whole other meaning. I don't want to say whole other class. It's really a whole other series of really understanding where the oral law and why the oral law, that's a whole other thing to go. But there are lots of things throughout the Torah, both when it comes to Jewish law, and Jewish wisdom, that is not written in the text. In fact, I would say probably vast 99, I don't know, 99, I would say 80%, well, probably closer to 90% of everything we do in Judaism is not actually literally found in the text at all. It's alluded to, and it's, anybody know, I just had this on a little bit of a, oh my gosh, already 8:05. Okay, we have to continue this. I didn't even see the time. I apologize. But anybody know, if I ask you, side note here, totally, because just jog my memory, David, and we can end with this and maybe continue next week to get to the juicy part. I don't know what people's times are, but it's 8:05. We usually have to do a hard stop. But if I ask you in the Seder, right, what are the steps of the Seder? Now, I don't want to put anybody in the spot here. So, this is not a test. This is not a test. What are the steps of the Seder? So I know a lot of people might just start, what do they start doing? They start singing the intro song, right? Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. If the people have learned that song, they go through the steps of the Seder. If you get to Yachatz, anybody know what Yachatz is? Don't be shy. If you raise your hand, you can raise your hand. Yachatz. What happens during Yachatz? Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. Yachatz, I took it random, is the breaking of the middle matzah, right? That's the step where you break the middle matzah. What happens during Yachatz? Well, we have 3 matzahs. We break the middle matzah. We take the bigger piece of matzah. We take that away for the afikomen. We hold up the small matzah. We say, this is the bread of our affliction that our ancestors ate in Egypt. And this whole thing I just told you is all Yachatz. One word, Yachatz. I ask you, what is Magid? Well, Magid is the story of the Exodus. We read about the 4 sons, we read the 4 questions, and then we go through the story of the Aramites and how he enslaved my fathers, and we go to Egypt and got heard our cries, and this is the staff, right? We all have the Maxwell House Haggadah, I know Seraph, I know Fire Angel, I the Lord, Dayenu. That's Magid. But all that is in one word, Magid. With one word, Magid, if a person knew the song and was somewhat familiar with the Seder, remembers, oh, I know what happens during Magid. What happens during Karpas? Well, we take the herb and we dip it in the salt water. We have a whole explanation. So you have to view the word Yachatz to understand as the written Torah. The verse is like the word Yachatz. The explanation, when you telling me what happens during Yachatz, is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, is the oral law, is the Talmud, is the Medrash, or the commentaries. That has been passed down orally. We can't put everything into this. You know what? People lift the Torah for Hagbah. If you put the entire Torah written down in the scroll, nobody's lifting that thing up. I promise you. But we put in the word Yachatz, and that since then, we had to write down Haggadah. We had to write down everything, but that is an essential. We read the verse. Going back to your point, David, read the verse. It says, look, she is pregnant, and I become inferior in her eyes. And that's all Torah tells us. And that at the time was to elude us. That's Yachatz. What does that mean? So there was an oral understanding of what that meant. When the oral started being forgotten, it was written down, yada, yada, yada. But that is how we view the verse. So she's upset. Sarai is upset because she's now being lowered. Now, I would also view that as she's the leader. So all of a sudden now people look at Sarai as second fiddle, no longer somebody giving the word of God. That's very detrimental for their whole mission. So this is the problem in the house of Avram and Sarai. What is their reaction? What do they do? You gotta wait next week. Stay at a cliffhanger.
I feel like I'm watching an episode of Batman and Robin. Next week.
Next week. Maybe next week. What's going to be with our heroes? How are they going to deal with the situation? What's going to be next week? Next week, we will find out. A little bit of a heads up. It's not going to be good. It's a poor reaction, but even though it was a relative, and it has to be relative to what they were able to do, but there still will be a message for us for how we can react differently to ourselves in our lives, and we'll see how they pick it up from there.
Clearly, Sarah goes to